Hello, this is Pastor Bella, Alex Nosage, Lagos, Nigeria. And tonight we will be talking about another wife of King David. He had a bunch of wives. He really did, surprisingly. But there are three in the Bible that you can actually follow their stories. Three that had at least a chapter dedicated to them. Tonight we have Abigail, the Peacemaking One. That's how I refer to her, because Abigail was a peacemaker, and she has a whole chapter in the Bible dedicated to her. We can learn a lot from her. Very, very interesting lady. Polygamy is not God's design for marriage. It's supposed to be one man married to one woman. Okay, but this was the Old Testament times, and God allowed some things to happen, perhaps just to show us that anyone who goes outside my plan, it's really not gonna work. It's not gonna work. Okay, you're supposed to invest all you can in one wife, the wife of your youth, not being polygamous. Okay, that's not the right design for marriage. But during the time of King David, before he was king, he married and he had wives. He had multiple wives. And you will see that in our Bible reading today is 1 Samuel chapter 25. And we are going to learn about Abigail, the Peacemaking One. A lot to learn from this woman. So we are introduced, when you start out with 1 Samuel chapter 25. Verse 2. Now there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was sharing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of this man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and of beautiful countenance. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. Introduction to Nabal and his wife Abigail. And what did the Bible say about Abigail? She was a woman of good understanding and of beautiful countenance. So she had two things working for her. She was a beautiful woman, but she was a wise woman. A wise woman is a woman is a woman of good understanding. She was wise. And you will see as we progress in this story that, this woman was really wise. But the husband she was married to was harsh and evil in his doings. A very, very evil and foolish man, as you can see as we go down in this chapter. So it comes about that David goes forward to ask Nabal. He sends 10 young men to go and ask Nabal for hospitality. They've been in the region, and this was the time that David was on the run for his life because Saul was still on the throne. But David had been anointed by Samuel, and this chapter starts out showing that Samuel died. This was after the death of Samuel. So this climate politically was a very sensitive time. A very sensitive time. And Nabal was really a fool. He was so foolish. Very foolish, as you will see in reading this whole chapter. Very foolish man. But God gave him a wise woman. Abigail was his wife, and very, very wise. A woman that kept up with the times, as you will see. So anyway, David had basically asked Nabal for hospitality. And in verse 10, this is what Nabal says. Then Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Will I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my sharers and give it to men I do not know from where they come?" So David's young men retraced their way and went back, and they came and told him all these things. Nabal reacted negatively and pridefully and foolishly against David asking for hospitality. And He was a fool because he didn't know who David was. He didn't know that David had been anointed as the next king of Israel. He didn't know, and he didn't care. He was a great man, and he was rich. And he's like, who's this riffraff from the wilderness asking me for hospitality, asking me for food and whatever? Get out, get lost. You know, that was his attitude. So immediately this message was delivered to David. You know, David was a warrior. He didn't even waste time. He said in verse 13, gird on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword. And David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 remained by the supplies. David was ready to go to war because he had been highly insulted by Nabal. Verse 14, but one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he reviled them. Nabal insulted David. Verse 15, but the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. So the servant keeps telling Abigail, well, the young man, it's not specified if he's a servant, basically giving good testimony about David and his men and how he took care of them and how he's a wonderful person to work alongside with. And so this young man is letting Abigail know that, verse 17, now therefore know and consider what you will do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him. Good heavens. Good heavens. Can you imagine that you are so foolish that people around you are saying you are foolish and you are worthless? That's how evil Nabal was. He was just an evil, stupid, foolish human being, and everyone knew it, including the woman married to him. Verse 18, take note. This is when the peacemaker steps into her role as a peacemaker. Abigail, the peacemaking one. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they are the children of God. Matthew chapter 5 verse 9. Abigail was a child of God. Abigail was a God girl. Abigail was a good one. We learned about a bad girl yesterday. This one was a good one. Look at her approach. Verse 18, and Abigail made haste. She hurried up, took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs and laid them on donkeys. And she said to her servants, go on before me. Behold, I am coming after you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. There's a lot to learn from this woman. I wrote on Facebook that wives, please make sure if you're going to present a request to your husband, make sure that he has eaten first. This was a lesson that I saw in Ruth. Remember? Ruth did not make her request until Boaz had eaten. Queen Esther made her request at a banquet, day 2, not even day 1. Okay? So you feed that man before you make her request. So what did Abigail take with her? She took food. Because David had come asking for hospitality and asking for food. Abigail took food to make peace. To make peace, I'm telling you. Where there's food, you can never go wrong with food. If you're a peacemaker, please have some food with you. Have some food. Let's break bread together. That's a sense, that's a communal sense. When you sit down with someone, have conversation with them, and you snack on something together. So how do you treat visitors when they come over to visit? You give them a drink or you give them a snack and you hang out, you're talking, you're munching. It goes a long way. So Abigail took some food. First step in peacemaking. I know, it's strange, right? Why on earth would food be a part of peacemaking? It's important. As a woman, even if you can't cook, make sure you know where to get some food. make sure you know where to get some food as a wife. If you want to make a request to your husband, it really does help a lot if you have some food on you. And you yourself, you're a plate of food. Okay? There's two kinds of food. There's the food from the kitchen and the food that you make in the bedroom. Okay? So as a wife, make sure that you are providing those. Make sure your husband is adequately fed with the food from the kitchen and the food in the bedroom. I'm telling you, it's very important. Ask any married woman on this platform. If you really want to make a request to your husband and make sure that he feels valued enough to actually hear what you're saying, food goes a long way and sex goes a long way. So I'm just letting you know, single God girls, food and sex, very, very important to a man. Extremely important. Okie dokie. All right. So Abigail took some food, but she did not tell her husband. That's a lesson. That's a lesson. I've taught on submission before. I've taught on submission if you're married to a carnal man, married to an unbelieving husband, like how Nabal is. If you're married to a present day Nabal, there's just some things you can't do with that man. You are serving Jesus, and he's serving the evil spirit that is in him. He's a child of the devil. There's just some things you cannot be open about. Really, ideally, marriage, you should be open, naked, and unashamed. But you're married to a fool. You're married to someone who has no regard for God. You have to be very careful. She didn't tell Nabal. She had to go and undo the damage that he had done. What a foolish man. He was so foolish. And when I read this story, it's so nerve-wracking. Because I already knew who David was, and he's my favorite man in the Old Testament. I just love King David, I'm telling you. I love that man. I love King David. And who is this fool to say no to King David? You know what King David has been through? He's not king yet, but come on, he's been on the run, suffering and writing the book of Psalms, encouraging himself and encouraging us today, you know? So could you please just give him some hospitality, Nabal? But Nabal did not give King David, well, he wasn't king yet, but he didn't give David hospitality, so I don't like Nabal. Usually God will give you such a godly woman. God will give you an Abigail, but you're such a fool. You're a fool in the way you handle your wife, in the way you handle your life. But thank God for the wisdom of Abigail. So she didn't say nothing to Nabal. She went after David. She went after him. And verse 21 shows the damage that Nabal had done, because David was ready for war. And look at what David says. Surely in vain I have kept all that this fellow has in the wilderness. So David was actually helping Nabal look after, I believe, his sheep in the wilderness. Helping Nabal look after things in the wilderness. And David goes and says, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him. And Nabal has repaid me evil for good. May God do so to the enemies of David, if I leave by morning light one male of all who belong to him. David was coming to kill that whole household. He was coming to kill all the males in that household. He was out for blood, because David had taken care of Nabal's properties out there in the wilderness, and Nabal had just treated David like he was nothing, basically addressing him like he was a servant. Very ungrateful, foolish man. Verse 23. And when Abigail saw David, she hastened and dismounted from the donkey, and she fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground. Women of God, God girls, humility. We saw it in Ruth, humility. You cannot be a woman of virtue without humility. When you are going to approach a man, be humble and have some food, okay? Yeah, you see that from Abigail. She had food in her hands. And she knew her husband had really messed up. So she had to take the position of humility. humility. She fell on the ground, face down. Face down. David had never met this woman before. This was a woman who was coming out to intercede for her family and her people because she knew her husband had gone too far this time and this was not going to be good. She had to hasten and hurry to David and intercept David because David was on his way to start a war. And God is on David's side. So you know, if David comes to Nabal's house and goes to war with Nabal, who's coming out as the winner? You know it's David. It's David. Verse 24, she fell at his feet. Hey, she's not even done falling. She fell before David on her face, bowed herself to the ground, and then she fell at his feet. Come on. This woman was wise. Hey, anyone ever go down to the floor to ask something of you? How do you feel? How do you feel if that's ever done to you? You take the person seriously. That person will have your attention. That person may even have your love. It's like, wow, it's serious. Maybe that's why in the world, men go down on their knees to propose to a woman. I don't know. It just makes you feel like, woo, he's there on the floor. Woo, I feel important. Okay. But this is a physical act of submission. To make a request to a man, to make a request to a man of authority, if it's your father, okay? I'm not saying just go up to any man and give him some food and kneel down, fall flat on your face, just any man. No. I hope the wives are paying attention, and I hope the daughters are paying attention. If you know that you want to make a request to your father's a difficult man, even if he's an easy man, and maybe you've really messed up, go down on your knees and make your request. I'm telling you, he'll hear you. He will hear you. So, she goes down on her knees and gives quite a long speech. Verse 24. Upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be. And please let your maidservant speak in your audience and hear the words of your maidservant. What a humble statement. This woman was just... wow, that's why the Bible introduced her as a woman of good understanding. She knows men. Good heavens, she's so humble and she just keeps going and going and going. Verse 25, please do not let my Lord regard this worthless man, even Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord, whom you sent. So she quickly calls her husband a fool because the husband had really done a foolish thing. So she calls it as it is. He is a fool. He's a fool. But she's right there on the floor begging for her life. Okay, so I know some of you come back at me and say, but she insulted her husband. Look, this woman was an expert negotiator. Many times you win a battle just because you present yourself as a child, a humble child. Children are so humble. If you present yourself, no matter how important you are, I mean, Abigail was a rich woman because her husband was rich. She was a woman of great importance too, but she had no problem going down to the floor and begging for her life and the life of her household. To the point that she said, may the sin be upon me. The way she just packaged her introduction before, while talking to David, she melted his heart. She melted him. She melted King David. I'm telling you, that's why I love this story, because God is such a romantic. He is a romantic. The Bible, so many romantic stories. This woman, with this speech and her carriage, won the heart of David. David. I just love David. Okay, let me not get sidetracked again because we're talking about Abigail, the peacemaking one. All right, so she keeps asking for mercy, but I want you to really read. I want you to read her speech to David. The way she presents herself. The humble way she presents herself, referring to herself as a maidservant. What a wonderful woman. She took away every shred of importance and just laid herself bare and very humble before David. She melted him. Please forgive. Please forgive. Look at verse 28. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant. She puts everything on her, even though it was Nabal who messed up. Nabal messed up. And I love what she said in verse 25. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. So she quickly created a division between her and Nabal that, hey, if I was there, this would not have happened. So I've come to fix this now. Because I owe you hospitality. If my husband refuses to give you hospitality, I will give you hospitality. I was not there. Have mercy. Verse 28. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord an enduring house. She's blessing David. Because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil has not found you in all your days. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and to seek your soul. But the soul of my Lord will be bound in a bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the souls of your enemies he will sling out as from the hollow of a sling. Verse 30, and it will come to pass when the Lord has done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler of Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. This woman kept up with the news. Nabal may not have known who David was. Abigail knew who he was. She knew this was the next king of Israel. She knew how David killed Goliath. She's talking about a sling in verse 29. Look at the wisdom of this woman. This was a woman that knew the battles of David. This was a woman that knew that David was constantly victorious. This was a woman that knew the importance of who David was, and she let David know that I know you're important. I know you will ascend the throne, and please remember me when you ascend the throne, that you will not shed blood because of this foolishness today. But remember me that you have dealt well with me today. And you know what David does in verse 32? He blesses, says, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you who have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and from avenging myself with mine own hand. Look, God girls, it's important to be a wise woman. This woman was so wise. She just knew how to approach David, and she melted his heart to the point that he's blessing and grateful to God that he meets with her today. Abigail the Peacemaking One. Abigail was also beautiful, so God knows what David was thinking, because we're about to find out at the very end of this chapter that David was checking out Abigail. He was checking her out that, whoa, I kind of wish this was the kind of woman I was married to. I'm gonna be a king. This is a worthy queen for sure. She knows how to negotiate. She can handle that powerful position. This is a great woman that I would love to be married to. That's what he was thinking. I'm sure that's what he was thinking, because David comes back for Abigail, but he's not gonna marry Abigail while she's married to Nabal. Okay, so David backs off, and Abigail has saved the day. She's an intercessor also. Abigail is humble. She's beautiful. She's wise. She brought some food. Are you taking notes? She brought some food. She was humble. She kept up with the news. She knew what was up. She knew how to approach a man. Take notes from Abigail. Okay? And she was a peacemaker. It's very good to be a peacemaker. There's a lot of craziness and conflicts going on around us. As a woman in your home, be a peacemaker. Be a peacemaker with your husband, with his family, with your children, whatever situation. Just keep the atmosphere cool. I always say something, that wives are the temperature of their homes. Okay? You're the temperature. Keep things cool. Keep the peace. I'm telling you, it's hard to be a woman because we have feelings and we want to get up and shout and roar. But what is that going to achieve? If Abigail had taken the stance of Nabal and being so proud and foolish in her speech, she would have perished. But she was a wise woman. She humbled herself. If you really want something, you better learn to humble yourself. Learn to take that position of humility. Take away that importance. No matter who you are in this life, even if you become famous tomorrow, when you approach a person of authority, please humble yourself. I don't care who you are. I don't even care if you're famous, okay? Just be humble. Your humility is such a fragrance that goes ahead of you and leaves after you. Abigail was unforgettable. Oh, she was unforgettable because she made a huge impression in the mind of David. He could not forget her. He could not. Okay, let's go on. So, verse 36, and Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until the morning light. Again, wisdom. Just like Queen Esther, wisdom. When did she make her request to the king? It wasn't immediately. There's timing. As a woman, you got to understand timing. Know when to talk to your husband. You better know. She knows why she didn't approach him at that moment. She knows he was very drunken. What you gonna tell a drunken man? You can tell him this. He needs to be back to his sane self. As a wife, know your husband. There's some men that really just can't hear anything until they've eaten some food. They're just some men. So instead of pushing yourself to that point of talking to him without food in his belly, whether he's that kind of man or not, just give the man some food and then present your case, okay? And then give him better food even later, the food in the bedroom. Yeah, he'll definitely hear what you're saying. All right? So, Nabal was drunken, and Abigail couldn't tell him anything that night. But in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, verse 37, he wasn't drunk anymore, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as stone. So Abigail told him basically everything that happened the day before, that, hey, your foolishness, we almost died because of you, but I went forward to save the day. Of course, she didn't tell him like that, Based on her approach with David, you will know that this was not a quarrelsome woman. This was not a woman who would just disrespect her husband. This was a very wise woman. So let people not now wonder that, oh, she must have been really rude to Nabal to cause him a heart attack. No, she wasn't rude. God's judgment had been activated on Nabal. Remember David. David was a man after God's own heart. And anyone that goes back then, a chosen one, if you dare rise up and insult the chosen one of God, repercussion is on you. So this was God's judgment upon Nabal. Abigail tells him everything that happened, and then God is the one that gives life and takes away life. So his heart died within him. It was basically paralyzed and useless. He became a stone. Verse 38, now it came to pass about 10 days later that the Lord smote Nabal and he died. Nabal died. Abigail was free from an evil and contentious, atrocious marriage. She was free. God had freed her up. Some of you are in terrible marriages. Surrender that man to God, and God will answer you in his own way. There are 3 ways he will answer you. This is one of them. Your husband can die, and that's the truth. It happened before, it happens today. Because you have to fulfill destiny. God has created a great plan for you, and you went and married some man that you didn't even ask God if this was the one for you. So now your marriage is in hot water. So what's happening? You need to surrender that husband to God. Pray for his soul continually. And if he's standing in the way of your destiny, God can strike him dead. That's the first one. The second one, he can walk away from you and never come back. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. If the unbeliever departs, let him depart. That's another way. Okay? And the final way is God can actually bring your husband to Christ. Those are the 3 ways, the 3 scenarios. So when you surrender your marriage, your problematic marriage to God, God is the final authority because his daughter, his God girl must fulfill destiny. You can't just be sitting there in marital pain and you're not fulfilling destiny. It's all about God. So if someone is standing in the way of you fulfilling your destiny, God is going to get him out of the way. God got Nabal out of the way. Yes, he did. And then, verse 39. Hallelujah. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed is the Lord, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from evil. For the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head." David recognized it immediately that God was with him, and God had stepped up to judge Nabal. That was the judgment of God, because this man insulted David, and God dealt with him. He died, and he was taken away. Continuation, and David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. Oh, I just love that part. Oh, what a story. It's so romantic. I mean, seriously, wow. A woman who had been in a terrible marriage. Terrible. God has given her freedom by giving her a wonderful man, a man after his own heart. David was a good man. He was a good man. He was a man who feared God. Yeah, he messed up with Bathsheba, but he was really ultimately a good man, okay? Abigail was given a new lease of life, a new marriage, a new man. David was the total opposite of Nabal. Are you kidding me? This woman entered into her rest. God can give you a new marriage. He can give you a new marriage with the same man. He can change your husband. God can change the heart of people. He can give you a new marriage with another man entirely if you're widowed or your husband walks away from you. Or he can give you the what I call the eternal marriage where you're just single until you die. God is your husband. Yeah, God has a will for everybody. Yeah, it's better not to get married than to end up married to a Nabal. It's better to just be single and serving God, I'm telling you. So some of y'all really want to get married, and may you not end up with a man like Nabal. Just love God. Your love for God and your dedication to God, God will preserve you and place you where you need to be placed. And God determined with Abigail the way he was going to reward Abigail for being so wise and so beautiful and so humble in the way she approached a man after God's own heart, God's chosen one at that time. God chose to reward Abigail with a new husband in David. Verse 41, and she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth and said, "Behold, let your maidservant be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." What a humble woman. I mean, this woman is just too much. She just doesn't stop. And Abigail hastened and arose, and she rode on a donkey, attended by 5 of her maidens, and she went after the messengers of David and became his wife. Wow. I mean, you can keep reading the chapter. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both became his wives. I don't know anything about her. She doesn't have a chapter in the Bible talking about her. There are only 3 major women that were discussed. 3 major wives of David. Michal, we looked at yesterday. Today is Abigail. And Thursday would be Bathsheba. These are the 3 wives that were really discussed extensively in the Bible. But he had other wives, as you can see from verse 43. There's Ahinoam, and verse 44, which we referred to yesterday. But Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. So I hope you're enjoying these teachings. But Abigail is really, she's awesome. Really, really awesome. And I have to wrap this up soon. Go back, meditate on this chapter, ask God to speak to you. It pays to be a wise woman. It pays to be a God girl who loves God. God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And God chose to reward Abigail with David. And what a way to meet your husband. It's just like when Ruth first met Boaz. They didn't know they would end up with each other. You know, I just love it. I love how Abigail went to intercede for her then marriage, not even knowing that this man, she will end up married to this great man who God will God will not neglect. God was on his side. He was a hero. Go back and read her speech She kept up with David. She admired David. And David meeting her was impressed with her. She was just such a graceful, lovely woman and a wonderful negotiator, a great intercessor. You have to be an intercessor as a woman. Abigail was awesome. She was an awesome God girl, the peacemaking one. Ensure you're a peacemaker. Ensure you're a peacemaker. Have God. Have some food. Have some food, especially when you're around men. If you have sons in your house, make sure your fridge is full. Men like to eat. If you have a husband, please feed that man well. Feed him well. Humble yourself before him. Your approach, your physical body language. I'm not saying you need to get on your knees every time you want something from your husband, but just package yourself well, like Abigail did. And treat your husband as a king, as your Lord. Approach him that way. Your marriage will be much happier. And if you're in a terrible marriage, I hope this story encourages you that there is a way out. There is a way out of that marriage. God is the determinant of that. So take your marriage to God and ask God to step in and save you. And God will save you. But please continually pray for your husband's soul. If you don't have a good husband, pray for his soul. Whether he gives his life to Christ as your husband or he walks away from you, please pray for his soul so that he doesn't end up in hell. All right? So this wraps up my teaching on Abigail, the peacemaking one. And may you all have the peace of Christ in you. And when you all have your homes, may you operate with the peace of God, which passes all understanding. This is Pastor Bella, Alex Nosage, Lagos, Nigeria, ultimate God girl. God bless you.